Daniel chapter 4 makes a claim most people find almost impossible to take literally. A Babylonian king went insane, crawled on all fours, and ate grass like an animal for 7 straight years. Skeptics have dismissed it for centuries as propaganda, a story invented to humiliate a foreign tyrant. Now, 2 discoveries are forcing historians to look again. I used to read Daniel 4 the way most people do, as a strange, almost cartoonish story, a proud king humbled into acting like livestock for 7 seasons. It wasn't until I found out there's an actual fragmentary Babylonian record that seems to describe something disturbingly close to it that I realized how much historical weight this chapter is actually carrying. That same king, who spent decades having his triumphs carved into stone and clay, seems to have gone almost completely silent in his own official records for the final decades of his life. Old Testament scholar Paul Ferguson has pointed out that meticulous Babylonian records exist for roughly the first 11 years of Nebuchadnezzar's reign, and after that point, the chronicles go strangely quiet for a reign that lasted over 40 years total. That silence is exactly where Daniel 4 says the king's mind broke. So is there anything outside the Bible that hints at this? In 1975, scholar Albert Kirk Grayson published a translation of a badly damaged Babylonian tablet held at the British Museum, catalogued as BM 34113. It's fragmentary, whole lines missing, the ends of others crumbled away entirely, so no honest reading of it can claim completeness. But what survives describes a king losing his throne temporarily, behaving in ways that don't match a normal royal record, and, strikingly, weeping to his god. The Babylonian word used there for God, Elishu, shares its root with the Hebrew word for God, El, and the text doesn't name which Babylonian deity is meant, which some readers find unusual for an official Babylonian inscription that would normally name Marduk or Nebo outright. The second discovery adds even more weight. A study published in the journal Iraq confirmed that 2 clay cylinders, shaped like small barrels, found near the ancient site of Kish in central Iraq were inscribed under Nebuchadnezzar's own orders, a confirmation that only came within the past year. The cylinders describe Nebuchadnezzar repairing a badly deteriorated ziggurat, a stepped temple tower originally built by an earlier king, and dedicating the restored structure to the gods Zabeba and Ishtar, closing with a prayer asking for a long, victorious reign. And that prayer, carved by a king asking the gods for decades more of glory, only makes what happens next stranger. Most people assume ancient kings either get remembered as heroes or villains, and that's the end of it. History picks a side, writes it in stone, and moves on. Nebuchadnezzar II breaks that rule completely. The Bible remembers him as the man who destroyed Jerusalem and dragged its people into exile. Babylon's own inscriptions remember him as something closer to a devoted temple builder, restoring ancient sacred sites for the gods. Both descriptions are sitting in the historical record right now, and neither one cancels the other out. Picture for a moment a modern head of state who's remembered internationally for launching a war, while his own government's records describe him almost entirely as a builder of hospitals and schools. Both things can be true about the exact same person. Here's the honest part. Scholars don't all agree on what this tablet is actually describing. Some argue it does support the Daniel account directly. Others point out this same mad king pattern shows up in records about a completely different Babylonian ruler, Nabonidus, the last king of Babylon, in texts like the Prayer of Nabonidus and the verse accounts of Nabonidus, both of which describe a king behaving erratically and withdrawing from public life for years. Recent academic work examining both traditions side by side has argued the madness motif doesn't transfer cleanly between the 2 kings, and that Nebuchadnezzar remains the more plausible figure behind it, though the identification isn't settled with certainty either way. If ancient tablets and half-missing inscriptions are the kind of detective work that genuinely grips you, that's exactly what this channel keeps digging into. Stick with me because the most interesting piece is still ahead. So where does that leave the actual Bible account? Daniel 4 doesn't just describe a king losing his mind. It describes a king losing his mind specifically because he looked out over everything he'd built, the towers, the restored temples, the reputation stretching from the Nile to the Persian Gulf, and credited it entirely to himself. That detail lines up exactly with what the archaeology shows us independently, a ruler who genuinely was an extraordinary builder, genuinely proud of it, and genuinely inclined to describe his own achievements in God-sized language. Whatever that Babylonian tablet is ultimately describing, the theology underneath Daniel 4 doesn't depend on it being resolved. The chapter's real claim is simpler and harder to escape. That unchecked pride in your own achievements has a way of costing you your grip on reality, whether you're a Babylonian king staring at a ziggurat or anyone else staring at whatever they've spent their life building. Maybe that's worth sitting with for a second. Most of us will never build a ziggurat or rule an empire, but almost everyone knows what it feels like to look at something they built, a career, a family, a reputation, and quietly start crediting themselves for all of it, forgetting how much of it depended on things entirely outside their own control. The Bible's answer to that isn't humiliation for its own sake, it's a restoration, the very same word carved onto Nebuchadnezzar's own cylinders, the same word used for repairing a broken tower. Daniel 4 ends with the king getting his mind back and using it deliberately to acknowledge something bigger than himself. Whether you're standing on top of something you built or trying to recover from believing you built it alone, that's the same door back in. Does a story like this make ancient pride feel distant from you or a little too familiar? I think most people land closer to familiar than they'd like to admit. Where do you land? 2 chapters later, another Babylonian king throws a feast. A hand appears. 4 words are written across a palace wall. No one can read them, and a Babylonian record may preserve the very night it happened.